So you certainly don't support intermediate housing. Are there any other views? I think Councillor down the back wanted to.
I would certainly support people who cannot afford to buy, and they have got too much money for us to give subsidised rent to. It just makes sense.
Okay. Is the woman down the front here?
Hello, I've gone down that thing with one of my sons, and even if it would be possible for my granddaughter, what they don't tell them, or they tell them and they don't understand, because invariably young people, they buy a quarter of etc. Say it's £100, they've got £25 mortgage. There's 75%.
Sorry, could you use the microphone?
I can't. Am I all right now?
Yeah, thank you.
They say they got £25 with, I'm talking in £100 now, and £75 they pay rent on. They pay more or less not much under a market rent for that. But they are paying maintenance for the whole place that they live in. Now in council property, there's a certain pound, which they've brought up now lately, what your maintenance are. But if you only own 25%, what it takes to keep it fit, yeah, the 75% of your rent usually goes to the upkeep of the property, and it's invariably housing associations has got it. And when that person now, they've probably lost money now, but when they bought it, if they then earned 200, it went up to £200, right? They would have to give the profit back to the housing associations, yes. They get it all and they still paid rent. Now that's not on either. That's that policy. That is it.
Sorry, there's a gentleman up there.
I think on the point of the division between social rent and intermediate, I was listening to the gentleman from Harrow Road, and I think presumably the problem is that because of the special nature of Westminster, where it is at the heart of the capital city, the demand for social rented housing is extraordinarily high and will always outstrip possible supply. So if you use that as the test for how to allocate affordable housing, you're going to end up with a world where 100% is always for social rent, if that's the sole determinant. Now that doesn't speak to the idea of mixed communities. So I think you've got to make some broad assumptions about the role for intermediate housing. And a lot of people here seem to be concerned about the ideas of sons and daughters and how they can stay in Westminster. And intermediate housing can have an enormous role to play in that. So I just felt that we ought to recognise that in this room.
Okay, Councillor here.
There is a role for intermediate housing. The problem is that you're taking it out. You're calling it affordable housing, and that it isn't. It won't fulfil that role in Westminster. If you want to have an intermediate housing, then it's got to be. It can only be units of studio, one-bed size to be in any way affordable. And the evidence is that actually, at whatever price it is out of the range of our residents. If you're talking about enabling the sons and daughters of our residents to be able to start a family and move off on their own, you're talking about a family quota for affordable housing, and for all sorts of good reasons we don't have much of a family quota now. But the intermediate housing is I have never once found, in all my years of doing this councillor surgery, and it's all about housing, I have never yet found anybody who, when offered, told about intermediate housing, is able to afford it. And it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make one simple point?
Sorry, we've got a gentleman here.
Suburbia was created by people who lived in central London who moved out where they could afford to live using the railways. That's over 150 years ago. Now, if you don't want to accept that and you say, oh, we've got to do it within Westminster, you're out of the country.
Okay, and the gentleman here?
2 points. I think that one has to combine the intermediate concept and the rent levels with the design, what we were talking earlier. And the fact is there is housing that can be designed and built. Yes, I accept that for the smaller units. Those can be in the intermediate sector, and I know they're done and they are sold as an intermediate product. Another thing we've got to recognise, though, is that if we're not careful, we create a huge polarity in the housing market. Yes, we have the priority for the people in the greatest need, and yes, we have people in the open market buying very high value houses. There are thousands and thousands of people in the middle. They are hugely important to Westminster. They work here, they're important to the economy. And we still have to find a part of this offer for them. And your question is about that percentage. That these percentages both give the priority to the social rented sector. These percentages both give the majority to the social rented sector. So they do get the priority. There still must be the 30 or the 40% for others, and I think your approach needs to address that issue. And the Mayor, of course, is now proposing 60-40, as I'm sure you're aware. Thank you.
Okay. The next question that we move on to is if we're looking at taking a more flexible approach on a site-by-site basis, are there some areas where we think we should adjust that mix? So whatever mix that we arrive at, and assuming that, I mean, this is perhaps more for those people who support an option that does include an element of affordable housing, do you think that we should make exception in certain areas? So if, for example, you've got an area that already has in excess of 50% social rented accommodation as part of the housing mix, do you think we should make exceptions to the types of affordable housing we would seek in those areas? Or do you think we should apply the same proportion across the whole of Westminster? Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, the gentleman
I
here.
think the problem, and it sounds in theory and written in a policy document, it sounds nice, sounds fun and dandy. And then but you take it down to the ground level, and this is about social cohesion, and that is, I believe, a much more important priority. Can you imagine the social, the lack of social cohesion, social division such a policy would create in an area of high density, of high levels of overcrowding, high levels of substandard accommodation, where priority is given to developing 6 small units for people either intermediate or for other housing needs other than social affordable? Can you imagine the social division that would create in those streets from people who've been waiting years, decades, to be rehoused into decent homes, and they see the council prioritising people who don't have necessarily a high housing need, but have a housing need that is of a more peripheral nature. And I just think it's a dangerous step for the council to be looking at.
So you're saying certainly in those areas that already have a high level of social rented accommodation, there's even less scope for providing these other types of units, such as intermediate, because within those areas you've got people who would resent that provision because it should all be social rented. Is that right?
Well, all I'm saying is that if the objective of the policy is to look at providing social cohesion will mean that those people with the greatest housing need will want to be housed as a priority. That will be social cohesion for them. And if you ignore that, then what will happen is you'll find social division. And we've already seen in some streets, in some parts of my ward, where you've got one end, which is the very high value, recently built properties, and at the other end, the not so high value properties, and near the Tradle meets. They have totally different objectives and values, and that's partly driven by a property value question, not about a housing need question.
Okay, the woman in the front had a hand up.
I hear.
Perhaps now, Susie, Mayfair and Belgravia.
Sorry, I'll come back.
Yeah. I hear what you say, but I think we do need interjection of people who's got money to live in our areas because they ask for better schools, they ask for better hospitals, they ask for better doctors, and they also, when we see what they can do, because this is what happens in our communities, we don't be together as one voice to ask for the better schools, and I'll say better education than us, well, I don't mean to insult them, but you will find that people who comes into areas that have got money will request from their rates more value. They will want better schools, because this is what's happening when the people are not there to be able to say what we're supposed to get and don't know how to say it, a bit like myself at the moment. But this is what we have to have some people with money in. And I don't mean they're horrible people. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I wish they were, because we'd have better secondary schools because they demand more, even in our areas. Sorry about that.
If we can take Councillor at the back who